Greetings, I'm Richie's Allan, and I'd like to begin with a brief disclosure. Although my playing may not reflect it, I've been a fan of Allan Holdsworth since I first heard him on a Tony Williams recording way back in the late 70s. Yet, upon trying to learn some of his intricate lines, I often couldn't trace their harmonic origin. As a result, they sounded out of place in my playing. And that's probably because my playing stems from the bebop tradition, and to this day, I primarily love to play standards, which, unlike Holdsworth's compositions, are mostly based on functional harmony. Regardless, even if you consider yourself a mainstream jazz guitarist like me, there is a great deal in his language that does translate to mainstream jazz and that we can actually apply over the standards repertoire. But I'm not referring to his lines, but instead his unique chord voicings, which is the focus of this two-part lesson series. In this first lesson, I want to exclusively zoom in on a portion of one of my favorite Holdsworth compositions, the 16 Men of Taine. This is the only progression of his that I know of that contains a chord sequence you can employ to reharmonize a well-known standard. And I should add that the standard in question is also not based on functional harmony. I'm referring to John Coltrane's Giant Steps. Now, I know many guitarists conjure mental images of near impossible hand stretches when they hear the term Holdsworth chords. But despair not. I promise the shapes in this progression are about as tame as they get. And even if you have no intention of applying them to Giant Steps, I'm going to show you how to incorporate them into a variety of much simpler progressions throughout this series. As for the Holdsworth-Coltrane connection, it should come as no surprise when you consider that Holdsworth, like Coltrane, devoted considerable attention to Slonimsky's thesaurus of scales and melodic patterns. Here we can see the chords for the first 8 measures of the solo to the 16 Men of Taine. And these are what we commonly call slash chords, which are 4-note voicings consisting of a triad, in any inversion that is, with a specific note in the bass. And let me play the 4 chords, and notice that there are no wide hand stretches. They're pretty easy to play. Next, let's examine the Holdsworth-Coltrane connection. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to first transpose this 4-chord progression a major second down. This way, the Holdsworth progression will now begin in B, which is also the first chord in Giant Steps. Here we can see that not only the progression has been transposed, but it has also been compressed into the first 2 measures. And that's because Giant Steps modulates this segment of the progression from B to start in G on the 5th measure. But before we analyze how and why it works, let me play the first 8 measures of Giant Steps incorporating the Holdsworth progression. And you'll notice here that I've inserted the missing chords that Coltrane uses to modulate from B to G, as well as a few others. Let me play it. So now you can start to hear the Giant Steps progression, but not necessarily the melody. But the good news is that the melody notes are already present in each of the triads. So all we have to do is invert some of them so that the melody notes reside in the top voice. And here you can see them already inverted. Now I have to admit that it is much harder to play the changes with these inversions. This is where those notorious Holdsworth hand stretches come up. But even so, I am going to attempt to do so very slowly. If you are enjoying this lesson and want to discover the true origin of the giant steps progression, let me inform you that contrary to popular belief, it was before Coltrane by none other than Maurice Ravel. And I give you ample proof of this in my video, Ravel Chords for Jazz Guitar, Part 2. And I will place a direct link in the info section below. Next, I want to briefly comment on how the Holdsworth progression relates to Coltrane's, and I'm also going to suggest how to improvise over it for the adventurous. But before I do, I want to tell you about the mega study package that you can download for this two-part lesson series. It includes a PDF booklet featuring all the notation and tab from parts 1 and 2, as well as a study of 31 unique chord voicings used by Allan Holdsworth and how you can use them. I have also grouped several of them into 10 major and minor 2-5-1 cadences so you can incorporate them into your favorite standards. Finally, I've included ready-to-play portions of well-known standards featuring these chords. And MP3s for all the examples are also included. And you can download all of it for a nominal contribution from jazzguitar.richiezelland.com/premium, and you'll find it under chord studies. Here we see the original giant steps changes above the Holdsworth reharmonization. We also see some suggested scales for improvising over the slash chords. These are also the mother scales from which these slash chords can be derived. And depending on how we analyze them, there can be more than one choice. You see, in conventional harmony, chords take on different functions depending on their placement within the context of a progression. But here we are not dealing with functional harmony. And having said that, note that these Holdsworth voicings are not necessarily harmonic relatives of the original Coltrane chords. But what makes them work is that they contain the giant steps melody notes and several other components of the original progression. So next, I'm going to be adventurous and attempt to improvise over a chorus of giant steps so you can hear the effect of the Holdsworth-Coltrane connection. Be on the lookout for part 2 of this series titled Holdsworth Chords Applied to Jazz Standards. This will be much more user-friendly as we will deal only with applying those unique Holdsworth chords over some familiar 2-5-1 cadences. And for those of you still with me, I truly hope you've enjoyed this lesson and learned something new. If so, please be sure to like and comment. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe. I'm Richie Allan, and I look forward to sharing another info-filled lesson real soon with you. Until we meet again, you know the drill. Practice, practice, practice. Take a break. Rinse and repeat. Shalom. May peace be with you.